Hello, I'm Alex from IGN, and I'm joined by Daniel.
Hey.
Now, last week, Daniel got the chance to play Grand Theft Auto 5 on PC and next gen.
Yes.
What did you think?
It's bloody impressive. It looks really good. We've seen the trailers, we've seen the comparison trailers, loads of graphical upgrades, but that wasn't the big new difference that I saw in action.
So the big thing, and it's been much rumoured for a long time, is it's going to have a first-person mode. Now, what does a first-person mode bring to the kind of GTA experience?
Well, we reviewed GTA a year ago, we gave it a 10 out of 10, we said it was a masterpiece, so it's not a game that was lacking, it didn't need something new. But obviously the game's coming out again, I've played the game, lots of people have played the game, 30 million plus copies sold, and I think it just adds a new way of exploring this world. It's a new way to experience GTA. You can play the game from beginning to end entirely in first person, so you just switch into it by cycling through the camera options and you're suddenly in first person, whether it's Franklin, Michael or Trevor. You can play the entire game from that perspective.
But how does it actually feel different when you're playing through, I don't know, particular missions or whatever?
Yeah, I think the easy way is to be really cynical about it and go, well, it's easy to do that, not being a game developer or designer or a coder, and you just move the character and the camera lower down, and then you got a first person game. But obviously it's much more extensive than that. So I spoke to the animation director at Rockstar, who kind of walked me through the process and kind of taught me through it, and it's much more complicated than that. You've got to basically rebuild the game, and that's possible because the world is much higher res and it's much more detailed and fuller, so you can have that first person perspective and it stands up to the level of scrutiny. So if we'd adopted first person in the PS3 version, I think you would have seen the textures were a little bit rougher up close.
Just wouldn't have quite worked.
Yeah, you needed that kind of more higher fidelity world to explore for it to really pull it off. But there's lots of other things. There's lots more animation, it's actually crazy how they've used the extra year to really, I kind of probably describe them as convincers. So there's stuff I was racking up a wanted level, and I was firing off an RPG in a suburban area, and loads of cops started pulling up, and I thought I'd do one. I was getting shot at, and I jumped over a fence, which was really intense, did the combat roll, running for a car. It felt more intense because it seemed to take longer to get in the car. It doesn't, but it just you feel more panicky, and then when you get in the car, you close the door, you look down, you're ripping out wires to hotwire the car. It feels like it's more intense. And then I looked down and there was a bullet hole in my arm, and blood was coming out down my forearm. So it's all that extra stuff. It's not just they've moved the camera, they've created your character around you. You feel like you're in,
it feels real.
Yeah, you're Franklin. There's lots of little kind of fidgety things they do. So if you leave the character idling, they'll crack their hands, or if you use the phone, they now pull up their phone rather than it being an overlay.
So one of the things you described it as was it's kind of like a Call of Duty cutscene, but actually you're playing it in an open world environment. Yeah,
that's when the game kind of funnels you that way to a set piece moment. So I played a couple of missions, and one of the missions I played was the one where Trevor has to drive a motorbike onto a moving train. And from first person perspective, the bikes feel faster. It feels like this big orchestrated set piece. And then obviously that mission segues into gunplay. So it feels more like a first person shooter. And then you driving a boat, so it's like a driving game in first person. So it's not like they've just made GTA into a first person shooter, because it's also a driving game. Also, it's a game where you can just explore. So it's more than they've just turned it into a shooter.
Well, so I guess there's two things there. How does the driving actually kind of feel compared to it did in the last game? Is it still as sharp? Does it feel different?
I think the controls have been retained wholesale. It's still GTA 5's driving mechanics. I don't think they dynamically switch it once you get in the car. That's something I asked. But when you get in the car, what's crazy is every car has its own steering wheel and dashboard, and all the consoles function. So if you go in, the rev counter works, the speedometer works. In higher end vehicles where you have a fancy digital display, it'll display the radio station and the song you're listening to.
That's insane.
Which is ridiculous. Same goes for planes, helicopters. You get into a cockpit, you get on a motorbike, you put a helmet on, which kind of muffles the sound, restricts your vision a little bit.
Wow.
So it's all these little things, not just moving the camera.
And I guess the other kind of important part is by switching it to a first person mode, especially in combat, you're then going to presumably draw comparisons with the likes of Call of Duty, games that are designed as first-person shooters from the ground up. How does the kind of gunplay feel compared to them?
It feels like they did a lot of work in it. All the weapons are kind of being animated. They're really high res. They've got muzzle flashes. They dispense ammunition when you fire them. You can look down at iron sights if you want, and it's also very customizable. So the default is it retains the controls that you have in third person. You can take cover in first person, or you can go in and customize it so you can switch it so it plays like Call of Duty.
Right.
You can click in left stick and you can run instead of tapping A or X.
Yeah.
You can set it so when you take cover, it switches to third person, kind of like a Rainbow Six.
Right.
So you can like make it the experience you want. You can play it wholesale first person shooter. You can play it like you did GTA 5 first time around, or a hybrid of the two.
Yeah. So I guess ultimate question, you spent 60 hours playing GTA 5 on last gen. Are you going to go back and play it all the way through on next gen?
I think when this was announced, I thought I'd pick up the game because I want to like play online again and I want to explore that world again. I wasn't that much interested in redoing the story. I love the story, but I don't know if I had the incentive. But seeing it in action and seeing that the way that this, it really does kind of reinvigorate and refresh the game. Like, it gives you a brand new perspective on it. Like, you know, I know those three characters really well, and it makes a big thing of switching between characters. And suddenly you're in a car and you look to your right and Trevor's speaking at you. It's kind of a really new way of playing it. And it's, I definitely feel like I'll play more of the missions again.
Okay.
Than I thought originally.
That sounds pretty good. So that is our first take on GTA on next gen. For everything else on Rockstar's Epic, stay tuned right here on IGN.